Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Welcome, one and all, and here we are at the start of what I hope will be a relaxing and restorative period for us all. Boy, have we earned it. Before we start today, I'd like to lay down a gauntlet to my fellow presenters for the quirkiest place the show has actually been broadcast. Exhibit A, I'm currently broadcasting from a glamping pod in the remote area of Agios Theodoros in Cyprus, enjoying some much-needed downtime with the family. Where are you tuning in from today? Text in, let me know. If your wings have been clipped by the complexities of the traffic lighting systems and the testing shenanigans, let me know where you are and where you would rather be. Distinct lack of fading option on my dashboard here for the music there. Before we get to the show itself, I'd like to just give you a little bit of feedback on the Olympics. I know that Seb did that yesterday and gave us a bit of an update, and many of you will be waking up to the news that we have, or GB have, accrued another 6 medals, taking our total to 24. And I wanted to share special congratulations to Bethany Shriver for GB gold in the BMX. If you've managed to watch it back on iPlayer, or actually even watching it live, perhaps, the sheer intensity of the scenes at the end of that particular race, where she finished very, very close first, the euphoria, its exhaustion, the elation, and to some extent as well the disbelief was really palpable, and it really was quite moving to watch those scenes at the end of that. So well done, Bethany. What I think makes it even more of an achievement is, and I read this just this morning, is that funding for BMX, representing GB and BMX, was actually stopped in 2016. So to actually get to the event today, Bethany had to crowdfund over £50,000 to be able to actually compete. And in addition to that, she actually worked as a part-time teaching assistant to fund the training that went with it. So it really is an absolutely remarkable achievement, and I'm sure that she's certainly going to be very proud of herself and her friends and family as well. And also a hat tip to the Prince of Peckham, Kai White, who finished with a silver medal in BMX. Equally fantastic sort of backstory, I think. But the thing that really did hit me on this was the age of these two youngsters. 22 Bethany is, and 21 Kai. And I'm not sure what you guys were doing at the age of 21 and 22, but certainly I was not competing for Olympic medals, that's for sure. Maybe you were. Text in, let us know if you were. But it just kind of hammered home the fact that the pressures almost in society, but in sport as well in general, to be fantastic at such an early age, to be at a high level at such an early age, and the amount of time and dedication and resilience that these athletes have had to show to get to where they are now in their very young fledgling lives is something which I find absolutely incredible. And whether you're into athletics and sports or not, for me it really is the story, the backstory that really resonates, I think, with a wider reach of people. I think, yes, and in fact, in 5 minutes' time, Ala Masso, who is representing the Refugee Olympics team, is due to start his freestyle 50 meters heat 5 swimming. Ala is from Syria, but now lives in Hanover and got there via a route of a number of different countries. And his ambition was actually to compete in the 2020 Olympic Games in Tokyo. So again, the backstory there is phenomenal. And I think for all 3 of the athletes which I've named there, at some point along their careers, in different amounts of measure, people have helped them, people have supported them, people have shown them a degree of compassion. And that's a nice transition into, I think, the introduction to our show today. Today's show is all about compassionate teaching. And we're lucky that my guest today has a deep passion for compassion. Steph Matthews hails from Northumberland, where her teaching career has taken her to Liverpool, Manchester, Indonesia, and to her current post as head of English at an international school in Germany. She has a master's in teaching, learning, and leadership. She's a Gaelic football player, a scuba diving instructor, a free diver, and she can hold her breath for 3 minutes. Now, Steph, I'm not sure about if I was to relay that stat to some of your friends, but they might be a little bit in disbelief that you're able to actually hold your breath for 3 minutes.
Absolutely agree, Dorian. Nobody believes me. That's always my go-to, which I've now revealed to the world, for 2 truths and a lie. And everybody always says that's a lie. No way do you hold your breath for 3 minutes. But I can, I promise.
Brilliant. And how, I assume you were broken up for the holidays already?
Yes, I did a few weeks ago, and I had to go to, well, I didn't, but I have to, but I chose to go to Malta to avoid quarantine in the UK. So I've gone via there with some free diving and scuba diving and back to the UK. So I have been home for a week, and now I am in Ireland, where it is, as it always is, raining, but it can't be the Emerald Isle without it. So I'm just visiting a friend here now and enjoying the holidays.
Amazing, fantastic. And I'm sure some listeners may be jealous that sounds like you've already had sort of a week and a half, 2 weeks already. And I think I saw Tom just tweeted earlier in this show that he was only on day 2 of his holiday. So the holidays have just begun for some, but some of us are already well into ours. So Steph, let's get to it. Thank you for coming on today. I did just give a very brief whistle-stop tour of your journey to this very moment, and owing to the nature of our topic, compassionate teaching, would you mind starting us off by giving us a more detailed account of this journey, so that we can really get a sense of the experiences that you've had and how they've shaped your ideals or influenced your ideals?
Yeah, I'd love to. So I started teaching at the grand old age of 21, fresh from uni, and I was in an inner city Liverpool school as an unqualified teacher, and I trained on the job. I only planned to do it for a couple of years, but then I just got into it and was like, wow, I love this. Like, I loved working with the kids and finding new ways to connect an idea with them, the relationships, those little breakthrough moments when you're like, yes, I'm there. Like, they're engaged, they're with it, they're on it, they're making the progress. And that community feel as well, working with the team to explore the latest government change or challenge and the best way to approach it. And I really enjoyed it. So I decided to stay in teaching. And in my second year, I started working in literacy at my school. And then I went on to do my master's thesis on bibliotherapy, and how connection with literature can help students to find ways to talk about their own lives, and it can actually be used as a form of therapy. And there's quite a lot of, or there was at the time, quite a lot of research around that with adults, but not so much with students. And so I worked with the Reader, who are a national charity, in developing their school program. So I was definitely starting to engage in that line of inquiry then. I then had a year out and had a sabbatical and went traveling the world, which was wonderful. I was visiting some schools along the way and keeping my toes into the education sector. But I then returned to Liverpool, and I did, as part of my MPQML project, I moved the literacy into a focus specifically on oracy, and I worked with Liverpool City Council, and it was such a great project. So I created this mascot, which was Scouse Mouse, because obviously we were in Liverpool. So for those who don't know, that's the colloquial name for people from Liverpool, is Scousers. So Scouse Mouse came to have his own motto, his own theme tune. He had a song that my friend recorded and we wrote. And one of
are we going to get a performance of that as well?
Absolutely, I've got my guitar ready. Just coming for it. And so one of the things was about high standards of accurate literacy, also from staff members. And Scouse Mouse's motto was, be Scouse and proud, but learn to speak proper. And then in brackets was Lee, because it would say speak proper, and it's like, let's actually speak properly, you know. So
Gotcha.
that was his little thing. And he had, I mean, would you like me to sing? I am a terrible singer, but if that's what you want me to bring to the show, I can sing you his little motto.
I think the listeners are screaming at their radios right now, going, please get her to sing. So
okay.
you have to.
So
Sorry.
I mean, there were several verses to it, but his little, the intro that I remember was, Scouts, Mouses, Scouts and proud. If you say something properly, you say it out loud. And so that was what we said to kids, you know, because it was about, you know, it was so important to understand the pride that the kids had in their regional accents. And obviously, as you can hear, I hope I still got mine. My sister always says I've lost it now, but from the north. And it's so important in who you are and your identity. And so it wasn't about eroding that and saying, well, you know, you're wrong, you're not speaking correctly. It was like, you know, no, be Scouse, have your accent, have your, you know, your own dialect, but just own it, absolutely, but just know the right place. And so the kids would, you know, if teachers made any errors, and like a common one was and were, you know, we was going instead of we were. And so we encourage like kids and staff, if there was an error that the kids spotted, they would just go, Scouse mouse, Scouse mouse, Scouse mouse. And that was the way to kind of draw it out.
Normalizing errors and kind of showing that kind of errors is actually good. Yes, celebrating errors and correcting it. Yeah.
And
I think I remember Tabitha McIntosh's show a couple of maybe last week or the week before actually was talking about the very, very same thing, I think. And I also this also resonates with me as coming from the Southwest. You know, where we've got a very thick kind of West Country accent. I'm very proud of where I come from, etc. And to an extent, the language, if you like, of Bristolian. But what's happened on occasion since I've kind of moved out of Bristol, moved to different places around the world, it's been diluted, and it's been diluted for a number of reasons. The people that are around me, and people can't always understand me when I'm speaking Bristolian as well. So whilst I own my accent, I still think it's necessary to be able to communicate with people who may not understand those kind of regional differences.
Yeah, and it's about being able to have that skill to switch, you know, so you can you can adapt and use it. But so that was really nice, and I probably
sounds fantastic.
Had a patent put on that actually and patented it. My friend in Newcastle, I told her about it, and then she's a primary teacher, and she had her kids have the canny bear. And so the canny bear was like their little mascot of how to, you know, how to speak correctly in correct situations. But yeah, it was quite cool.
I love it.
And then, so I'm still, you know, 0.2 through my life journey.
Right.
Where am I up to? So yeah, after Liverpool, after a number of years, I then moved internationally. I moved to Indonesia, and I was worked with house captain, and then I went into leading within the English department. So I was second of English, and then moved on to head of department. And I think there it was really where you're leading a team of people that you work with daily, and I think that was where I sort of thought, wow, this is so important to have compassion for the individual, for their journey. You know, that made me be a much better leader, and it was, you know, a learning curve for me, as everything is, and my development professionally has been in a lot of leadership courses, but also personally, I think a lot about understanding myself and investing into personal development, and I think that helps me be a better leader, a more compassionate leader, and then therefore to create a better working environment, which of course then has those positive outcomes on student learning.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. And if I may ask a question to that regard as well, do you think that going from the UK and then suddenly teaching internationally, you know, you generally spend, you know, you're far away from family and your friendship groups, etc. So perhaps maybe being in an international setting, your colleagues are almost your family in many places. So do you feel that kind of amplified almost that feeling that you needed to show compassion and understanding of everybody's story, not just your colleagues but also students?
Yeah, I think definitely, because it does bring this unusual dynamic that I don't think you get in any other when you're teaching in the country that you're from, because as you say, you're wearing all of these hats, your friend, your colleague, your family, and you have to navigate those different roles. And that was a big learning curve for me when I took on the position, having gone as teacher and then moving up, and it was trying to navigate those roles. But definitely with kids as well, we know that third culture kids do have greater struggles with identity and who they are. They have so many skills in many different areas, being able to get into a situation, thrown in at the deep end, and they can adapt and they can mold and they can go with it. But those deeper inside feelings, like who am I and where am I from and where do I belong, a lot of those feelings are things that do affect those kids. So I think, it's definitely something that I find important internationally, not more so, but in different ways.
Yeah, and it's kind of intertwined with the idea of cultural capital, isn't it? In terms of the cultural capital of the students, which you're teaching in these places as well. And then you ended up in where you are now, or was that via somewhere else?
Nope, that was then I went to Germany. It was in a bid to be a little bit closer to home. Although, as we know, geographical location doesn't necessarily mean ease of being where you want to be these days. But it feels nicer to be a little bit closer to home anyway.
Absolutely, and here we are today. So that's your journey in a nutshell. Join us. We're just going to have a quick advert break, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of what it is to be a compassionate teacher.
Every teacher loves stationery, right? Imagine getting a selection of fun, beautiful and unique stationery items designed and selected especially for teachers, delivered through your door every month. You need to check out teacherslovestationery.club.
I'm always so excited when the box arrives. It's such a treat.
My Teachers Love Stationery Club box is just a little treat to myself every month.
It's always full of delightful and surprising items, including some really good quality stationery brands like Faber-Castell and Stabilo.
And because you never know what you're going to get, it makes it even more fun and special when you get it.
It feels really great to be supporting a family business that's run by real teachers. I can't help feeling like they just know what I'm going to enjoy using stationery-wise better than I do myself.
Visit teacherslovestationery.club and enter the code TTRadio when you buy your first stationery box to save £2 today. teacherslovestationery.club.
Welcome back. Thank you very much. So before the break just then, we just had a bit of a whistle-stop tour to the life and journey of Steph Matthews, who's our special guest today. And the topic for today's discussion is compassionate teaching. And I said before the break there, just before we kind of get into the deeper questions, I wondered if, Steph, if you'd feel happy enough to be able to share us your idea of what the concept of compassionate teaching is.
I'd like to just bring us back for those who were listening last week when you were talking with Ken, and he said that in his school they operate on a policy of trust and assuming the best intention. Whenever anybody comes to you, you don't assume, you've forgotten this, or this is, a negative thing. It's always what is the best possible outcome for this. And I really love that. And I think like teaching compassionately, leading compassionately, I think it comes from that similar place where you're leading from the heart. And I think it's recognizing that there are other motivating factors other than your own, which seems obvious, but we do so many things subconsciously, and they come from our own bias and our own experience. So, if I would never miss a deadline because deadlines are important and, they make things work and, it's really important to me. So I would never miss it. That doesn't mean that because someone else missed a deadline, that deadline is unimportant to them, because
yes.
Which I might have jumped to that assumption if I'm not being compassionate, because that's how it would feel to me. Well, it's important, so you obviously don't think it's important because you've missed it. Whereas actually, we know that from the ages of 0 to 7, our life experiences shape us so much, the way we learn to cope, the patterns, our behaviors, and it's innate, it's subconscious, and as I've done Go on, did you want to speak? You have
Yes,
to
I was going.
Dorian, you know I will just.
I was trying to hold my breath for 3 minutes there, but it's yeah. No, I think I agree exactly what you're saying there, and I think the idea of done is better than perfect is something that I think that you come across in later life, almost in your older life, because I remember myself when I was at school, it had to be the best job that I could do, to be able to, and if that meant not hitting the deadline and having to ask for an extension, etc., then so be it, so yeah, that's what just kind of pinged to me when you mentioned that just then.
And I think I've come to realize there's so much more as I've been doing exploration into inner child work, or some people refer to it as ego work, and understanding myself more and understanding what my own experiences, how they trigger things in me, makes me realize what I'm reacting to within somebody else, how my experiences are shaping my bias of somebody else. And that awareness, I think, helps me realize that so often a person's reaction to something, and these are students, these are friends, colleagues, family, it's not often about the thing at all. It's always, I find, about something much deeper, perhaps not being heard, not being valued, fearing something, help or support. And I mean, I'm not a counselor, I'm not a psychologist, I don't pretend to understand everyone's backgrounds and triggers, but for me, it's about recognizing that there are differences in the way we see the world that does impact our everyday interactions, and so that awareness helps me be more measured and more grounded when I'm interacting with people, and that's something I have to do consciously, or I've learned to do more consciously.
And would you say that you've learned to do it more consciously? Would you say that, again, that is as a result of you now teaching, perhaps definitely teaching in international schools? We recognise the difference there, but just in a number of different schools in different countries and different cultures. So experiencing different cultures and teaching in a multicultural classroom, for example. Is that what helps you kind of really get that broader understanding of the differences in everybody's single story almost?
I don't think it is. From that, for me, this awareness has come to the forefront, as I said, because of the work that I've done on myself, and also some experiences I've had when I was in a position of leadership where, afterwards I think, wow, I haven't done that in the right way, and I haven't dealt with that correctly. So it's part of the reflection through that. But even if I look back to when I started teaching in Liverpool when I was 21 and 22, and, so many things with the kids there that culturally we didn't understand each other, because they were coming from such different places. And so I think actually it doesn't need to be such a big difference as being from a different country or background, because actually that's the point, that we can live what we deem to be similar lives. I mean, even my sisters and I, we're from the same place, but we're not, our experiences are so different. So I think actually that we can overlook that. And I know a lot of our listeners today are from the UK, and I think that it's just as important there, because no matter if your backgrounds look similar on the outside, they never are. And I think that's what we need to recognise.
I like that. That's great. Thank you for that, Steph. I think we are nearly halfway through the show, and probably perhaps maybe not even kind of scratching the surface yet. It's a common phrase I've found for the last couple of shows, because I just seem to have to. I pick issues, or we pick issues which are just so meaty, and to give them their full attention in an hour just doesn't seem possible. So let me just kind of really quickly just be a little bit pernickety, I suppose, and looking up the etymology of the word compassion. It means to suffer with. So when we're saying compassion, and I'll read the Wikipedia or the dictionary definition, is sympathetic pity and concern for the sufferings or misfortunes of others. So my question would be, does that tessellate with your understanding of compassionate teaching? Does there always have to be a suffering or a need not being met or pity to be taken for you to be compassionate, or can you be compassionate with absence of that? What's your take on that?
Interesting. Well, it's definitely about recognition, and I suppose it depends on the individual. For some, that could be suffering with that person and feeling it, but I think that we've got to be careful, because I know that I've been in situations where, you know, I get myself too in it, and you bring it on yourself. You know, you're not protecting yourself as somebody who's listening to a lot of different like struggles or problems. Like you have to be careful not to take those struggles on as your own, but you have to share that space with the other person. And so I think that's a distinction. I did a coaching course recently, which I really, really enjoyed. I've done a couple over the years, but this one I found quite different, and it talks about leading from the heart, and then moving into the head, and then steps to do something. But they always talk about meeting your coachee at the same level. So even though through the questioning you tend to go, what are your heart areas, what are your values, but if that person is already past the heart stage and they're at the step stage, you have to meet them where they are, and you have to come be at that level with them. And so I think it's the same with having compassion from people. It's being at that level, and perhaps that is going through what they're going through as well. But in terms of suffering with, I think we have to be careful there, that some people do take on too many struggles, and then you lead to burnout because you take on everyone else's woes as your own. So you've got to be careful and have boundaries, I think.
Yes, great, thanks. And there's a clear distinction between that idea of empathy as well. Empathy and compassion is a clear difference between those two as well. And these things, as teachers, we, you know, even if we're not putting a name or a label or anything on it, these are the things that we do in our day to day, and things that we encounter in our day to day. And yeah, it's just really interesting just talking to other teachers and other people about these issues. Gail Glenn is going to hit us up with the news. So we're going to go on a news break, and then we're going to go into our next section. Stay with us.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
This is your latest Teachers Talk Radio News with Gail Glenn. In Scotland, business leaders have warned that preschool nurseries may be forced to close temporarily as a result of rising number of staff having to self-isolate. Private creches would like the Scottish Government to classify their staff as key workers, so that they can avoid having to self-isolate if pinged by the Test and Protect COVID tracing service. Private creches are relied on by thousands of parents when local authority nurseries are closed during the holidays. The staffing situation was described by Sharon Fairley, owner of the Little Flyers chain of nurseries in West Lothian, as deeply concerning. She said the reality is that many of our frontline workers, our NHS doctors and nurses, our ambulance drivers, police, firemen and women, even our supermarket truck drivers, rely on being able to place their children in nursery in order to attend their own jobs. Last week, the Scottish Government announced exemptions to self-isolation for workers involved in critical roles where staff shortages are in danger of putting at risk essential services such as health and social care, transport, and the provision of food supplies. Sharon recently founded the Scottish Private Nursery Association to campaign for an exemption for self-isolation. A poll of 3,221 teachers in England, carried out by Sutton Trust, found that 23% of teachers working in private schools said that they had been pressured by one or more parents over their child's grades during the past academic year. 11% of teachers working at schools in disadvantaged areas had been approached by parents, compared to 17% in the most affluent state schools, evidencing a social gap between state schools. The views of 497 UK students were also looked at by the Sutton Trust report, and 22% felt that their grades would be worse than in a typical year. Erica Holt-White, the Sutton Trust Research and Policy Officer, said, "This year's assessments were never going to be perfect, and it is likely that we will again see students left unhappy with their results. What is vital now is that universities and schools do all they can to ensure that these students, especially from the poorest backgrounds, do not unfairly lose out because of it." This has been your daily education news briefing.
Thank you for that, Gail, and welcome back. We are on Teachers Talk Radio live. We're talking about compassionate teaching with my guest, Steph Matthews. Before the break, Steph gave us her understanding of what compassionate teaching is. Interested to hear what some of your thoughts are at home. So you can call or text into the show. What do you understand to be compassionate teaching? How important is it for us to be compassionate teachers? And maybe you actually have some examples yourself where compassion in the classroom has yielded some really rich and positive outcomes. So text or call in the show and join the conversation. I'm going to continue our conversation now with Steph, where we dive in and get a sense of how how Steph actually got to this idea of compassionate teaching. So where did you first encounter compassionate teaching in its explicit sense? I said before the break that it's the sort of thing that we do on a day-to-day basis, but where did you kind of encounter it explicitly, and why do you feel it to be an essential component of your practice today?
When I was in my school in Indonesia, we did some work and training with Peter Senge from MIT. He did some work since the late 90s about exploring how we create the best conditions, including the tools and methods for enabling learning communities. And he looks at lots of different tools and frameworks that you can use with students, with staff, in order to discuss emotional responses. So we did, some work in school with that and explored uses of those tools with students. And they provide ways to teach, I think, the processes that often as adults we do subconsciously, which I think it was quite important to teach them. And it was important to unpick, because we often say, don't we, oh, I do that anyway, do that anyway, without looking at why do we do that and what does that really mean? And his work was really interesting, but I think for me the biggest influencer has been Dr. Brené Brown. I watched her talk on the power of vulnerability, and it was just fantastic. And then I moved on. She's done a number of different books, but her book Daring to Lead is a book about leadership, but also applies directly to your own personal life and self-development.
Right.
And she did a lot of research in that book about the world's greatest leaders. And she found that they were wholehearted people who were living from a place of a deep sense of worthiness. And she identified kind of 4 key facets that they each had, which was courage, compassion, connection, and also vulnerability. And I suppose that was really where I started to get into the work. But it's very similar, in presenting vulnerability, like suggesting students are risk takers with the IB learner profile and the principles. So I think there's lots of different language that we use for this. But I think, go on.
Yes, and I was just going to say, from what you said there, working with compassionate leadership actually is going to be the topic of Tom Rogers's show with Professor Michael West in September, I think, as well. So that would be really good for us to have a listen to that as well and see how that kind of aligns with what you were just saying just then.
Definitely, yeah. And I think it is going to be not only a direction for schools, but also like for society, like humans crave connection. We need it to feel safe, to feel cared for. And whenever we're looking at, creating cultures within schools, those that stop teacher burnout, that recognize personal challenges and how they impact school life, whenever we're looking at those things, I think we're looking for creating compassionate cultures. When I was exploring and looking for a new school, before I moved to Germany, when you ask like, what's a school like, what's the head like, the responses are always things like, oh, the head was great when X happened, they supported me, and they're great, they're really able. It's interesting because you can have as many qualifications as you want. You can have the most detailed school development outline, but if you're not there responding to the individual needs of your staff with compassion, then I don't think you are fostering the foundations for a positive school environment.
It's so true, and it's the cliche: a school is more than just the bricks and mortar, isn't it? It's that compassion and how the staff are treated, how well they feel, how safe they feel, and how happy they feel.
Yeah, and we see it even, like you were talking about the Olympics earlier, and if you look at Simone, is it Biles you pronounce her surname, the US gymnast who she pulled out, to focus on her mental health, and she's being supported by, because of the compassion that fellow athletes have got for her, because they know the pressures of like burnout, and even like yesterday when I was in the airport, I was looking at the non-fiction bookshelves, and a lot of the books on there, they're about relationships, human behavior, how to understand humans, and I think that journey of like self-healing, self-understanding, self-work helps us be more compassionate people, and I think they're skills we should be bringing into education as well.
I totally agree, and it makes me reflect on how perhaps maybe in human history, in Simone Biles's case, there was that kind of deep empathy and understanding of as I said at the start of the show, when people are so young and get so successful, and so there's a heck of a lot. We could talk about the Euro penalty takers as well. Those guys were all so young, and there is this outpouring of support and understanding and empathy, whereas I'm not sure, and maybe I'm looking at it through tinted lenses, but I'm not sure whether that sort of thing was was the same in the past 10, 15, 20 years ago, when before the majority of people would have been perhaps maybe would have taken each of those scenarios a lot more negatively and not kind of had that compassion. So I think it's super important that that we are discussing this, and that people are discussing explicitly what it means to be compassionate, and the importance of showing compassion, and how that by proxy simply just builds compassion in our learners, which I know is something which I'd like to ask you a little bit more about towards the end of the show, about how we sort of build and instill compassion in students. So let's flip a little bit around to thinking about teaching and compassion in our classrooms. Now, you're an English teacher, I'm a geographer, and I think both of those subjects lend themselves very well to the idea of that building understanding and looking at backstories and how people get from one place to the other. Now, in my head, as a form tutor, compassion is the bread and butter. Yes, to be a good form tutor, or to be a form tutor, you have to know your students, and build those relationships. Same with being a pastoral leader. I'd be interested to hear how you think we might promote being compassionate within different subjects, for example. So do you feel it's easier in some subjects to build compassion and show compassion than others? So English and maths, for example.
Yeah, well, I think it's different types of using compassion, like within English, as you said, it works so well, and often some of the things I share with my students are because of their connection to literature. Like recently, I knew 2 students in my IB class were having counselling, and I recently started that as part of my own self-understanding journey, which has been amazing. And I shared an example of that with them, and something that I was discussing at my counselling session, and how something that I experienced in my childhood is, I can see now how it's affected me as an adult. And in first part, that was to normalise, the idea of counselling, and to show them, it's totally safe, and it's actually, I totally recommend it. I find it brilliant. But also it was to connect specifically with a character in Dorian The Visit that we were reading, and how her childhood has shaped her life. And of course that particular example might not have such an authentic place in another subject, or teachers might not feel as comfortable sharing that. So you may not get those such examples where you're connecting directly with characters of famous figures.
Sure.
But this idea of compassion in daring classrooms, which is from Brene Brown, I think we can build in any subject. So she has another small, if you don't want to read her book so you don't have the time, she has another YouTube video called Daring Classrooms. And she describes a daring classroom as a place where both teachers and students commit to choosing courage over comfort, choosing what is right over what is fun, fast or easy, and practicing values rather than professing them. And I think that that's something we can do in any subject. You know, she talks a lot about shame and how that is such a huge factor in affecting individuals. This feeling of being unlovable, and she talks about how classrooms need to be shame resilient. And she discusses the difference between shame and guilt. So, like, if a student, you give a paper back and you know, a student hasn't done very well, and we've all been there, you can see the disappointment and the, oh, you know, I'm so stupid, like, oh, I'm such an idiot, I did this wrong, I've done this, you know, that is shame speaking. But if the student gets it back and says, oh, you know, I didn't study, that was a bad decision that I make. Not I'm stupid because I didn't study, but it was a bad decision that I made. That's guilt.
That's guilt, yes.
And so it's about separating the actions from the person, which is a classic behaviour management tool, isn't it? You know, we say to the student, your actions of this, and separate that from the child themselves. But I think making that clear to kids, and she talks about shame shields, and she said that when students or when people feel shame, there are 3 different ways that we deal with it. We can either move towards we can retreat from the shame. So we can withdraw, become silent, you know. We can move towards it, becoming the people pleaser. Oh, I'm so bad, you're so great, you're amazing, you're fantastic, you know, you have all the answers. But we can also move against it, and that is fighting shame with shame, you know, like the attack sort of thing, which is obviously the most painful. And we all do this. And even when she's saying it, you know, I'm sure you yourself are thinking, oh, wow, I can see ideas where I've done this. But she talks to her kids and says, okay, you've got a shield up right now. I can't get through that shield. We can't work like this, you know, like, and I just think that there's those sorts of tools that we can all use to connect with kids and help them recognize what they are feeling. Because sometimes you don't know that that's what you're feeling. You think, I don't feel good right now, and I don't want to talk about it, and I don't want to deal with it, and I don't want to face it. But you know, if someone's to say, put that in words for you, then
I also don't know why I don't feel good right now. Perhaps that could be the thing. Yeah, I think in Tom's show yesterday, he was talking about you know, being more open and honest about anxieties and thinking about how we share those, and it sort of got me thinking. Really, you know, we're teachers. We are human beings, right? We are fallible. We you know, it's that old idea that, you know, when you see a teacher in Tesco's, it's that you have that kind of standstill moment and go, what? You're a human being, and so I think there's definitely some value, some merit, and some necessity for us to show that kind of vulnerability of ourselves within our students. But I wonder to what extent we have to do that, because I don't, you know, I'm sort of treading a little bit sort of gently here in the way I'm sort of posing this question, but it's, do we want to appear in front of the class as somebody who is, you know, really struggling and doesn't know how to deal with it, and doesn't have strategies, etc., or do we want to kind of put across this impression that, okay, we're normalizing mental health, we're normalizing anxiety, you know, we're talking about it, and this is how I am dealing with it, this is how I have dealt with it. So do you see where I'm going with that? What do you think?
Yeah, and we do need to be careful, because, you know, like there needs to be a clear boundary between students, and you don't want students getting too concerned over, oh, my teacher's not coping, and that they're worrying, and, you know, that they bring that worry onto you. So we do have to be careful, and that's why some people won't be comfortable, you know, sharing things about themselves, and I think that's okay, and you have to do what you feel comfortable with as an individual, and some individuals will be more able to share with the students, and I think it's about respecting that individual, and I think that's okay. And I think I guess it would, I suppose, at the forefront is keeping students safe. And if you were in a place where you were really, really struggling and not currently coping and a bit lost, and then you share that with the class, then that's not good for the students, because they're going to worry about you, and that's, we wouldn't do that, because that's I suppose that would become kind of a safeguarding issue in a sense, because you're making the kids, putting the kids at risk emotionally, I think. Whereas if you were to say, actually last week or last year I was really struggling with this, and this is how I got out of it, and then I think that's okay. But it's very nuanced, and it's
sure,
different for each person.
Bit of a minefield, I think, for
Yeah,
some,
but I think
that's part of our job, isn't it? To
yeah,
navigate
and I think
that.
that comes down to schools to help staff navigate that, and how do we want to be approaching this, and how do we want to share this, and maybe that's when, as you said, it does come into form time, where we share controlled, thought through examples and things.
Tom Gleeson has sent a text in, fairly long, but Steph says hello. You can hear her, obviously. Don't need to relay. Maybe I was translating there. It's a fairly long text. I'm going to read it verbatim and see what sort of questions or things that we can get out of that. So it says, in our competitive education market, where schools are in direct competition, accountable to school inspections, parental expectations, and a prevalence to showcase exam successes and access to tertiary education, how does compassion coexist with teacher competition? Then says, often internationally, you are judged each year and are expendable. Additionally, many teachers are quite ambitious, which creates a collegial facade rather than a true collaborative and compassionate culture to develop student-centered learning. So there's a lot to unpick in there. I think I just kind of will just jump in before you kind of share your thoughts on any of that there, Steph, and say, I think certainly in the last kind of 3 or 4 years, I have found that there has been much more of a kind of a meaningful shift towards well-being and compassion in the international school field. That's not to say that it's perfect or anything up to the level of perhaps maybe what is in place and is going on in the UK right now. But I certainly do feel that there has been a recognition that there has been, yes, we are, if you say, international teachers are on fixed term contracts. So, every 2 years, a decision, or 3 in some cases, is made as to whether the school feels that the relationship can continue, if you will. And yeah, perhaps maybe as a if you are a manager in an international school, is looking after well-being, etc., is an extra expense. It's a bit of a minefield, what I'm trying to kind of get at there. But I understand what Tom's saying. But I would like to say that certainly some of the most progressive or thought, the better schools out there, particularly, already have this very high on their agenda in terms of addressing well-being, mental health issues, etc. What are your thoughts, Steph?
Yeah, I think I'm lucky enough that I'm in a school at the moment which does give space for these sort of these areas and to be compassionate, and they would respect that. And I think it just comes down to, as an individual, what are your values? And I think that if you find yourself, unfortunately, in a space like that where the environment that you're working in doesn't value those things and doesn't put those things as a high priority, then if that was me, I would leave. Which I know is easier said than done. I don't have a family. I don't have, dependents to think of. And I know it's not as easy as that for everybody, but I think it would come down, I suppose, to what I valued and what I wanted to see. And you do see that, you see people leaving because they're not in alignment with the school vision and the school values. you may be able to, within a school, create such a microclimate, perhaps within your own team, and have
like
that. And I think that's, that's something that I think I'm in a position to be able to do, because I am, the head of department, and so that's what I try and do. To create it there first, and hope that it aligns with the rest of the school. Maybe it doesn't exactly, but
Yes.
that's where I would.
I like that, tapping into the thoughts, feelings, the compassion of your colleagues, really. And I think kind of, as Tom said there, many teachers are ambitious, and it creates a collegial factor. Yes, you're in a huge environment of different teachers, of different levels of anxiety, different levels of all sorts, and so finding the people around you that you can help, that can help you develop personally, I think is a really good strategy. If you are stuck in somewhere and you don't see moving isn't an option, particularly during these last 18 months, movement hasn't been an option. What can you do with those around you? How can you kind of grow yourself, or how can you be well by engaging with those people around you?
Yeah.
Lovely. Okay. Again, I'm rapidly coming towards the end of the show. Unfortunately, we know I've got a number of more questions to ask you, so I'm going to go to an advert break and try and pick a couple of questions for us to finish on, Steph. Thank you.
Okay.
Creative Resources, made for teachers by teachers. At Creative Resources, we've been rethinking what a classroom can be. We've created a huge range of more than 2,500 original and exciting resources that span across more than 15 different subject areas. Whether you're looking for primary or secondary level resources, careers options, PSHE, arts or humanities, Creative Resources have the resources for you. We offer full curriculum packages and unique, challenging escape rooms themed on topics such as Shakespeare, Tudors, and fractions. We have quizzes, task cards, Tarsia puzzles, and lots more. Better still, more than 100 resources can be accessed for free. Just visit our website, www.CRE8TIVEresources.com. You can get 10% off any order you make on our website by using discount code TTRadio. Creative Resources, made for teachers by teachers. Every teacher loves stationery, right? Imagine getting a selection of fun, beautiful and unique stationery items designed and selected especially for teachers, delivered through your door every month. You need to check out teacherslovestationery.club.
I'm always so excited when the box arrives. It's such a treat.
My Teachers Love Stationery Club box is just a little treat to myself every month.
It's always full of delightful and surprising items, including some really good quality stationery brands like Faber-Castell and Stabilo.
And because you never know what you're going to get, it makes it even more fun and special when you get it.
It feels really great to be supporting a family business that's run by real teachers. I can't help feeling like they just know what I'm going to enjoy using stationery-wise better than I do myself.
Visit teacherslovestationery.club and enter the code TTRadio when you buy your first stationery box to save £2 today. teacherslovestationery.club. Introducing the Leadership Masterclass series by Diana Osagi. Learn how to ditch your fears and develop your leadership confidence. How to deal with difficult colleagues. How to thrive when you lead in a challenging environment. And how to get colleagues to buy into your vision. Join Diana for her online leadership masterclasses starting on the 10th of July and running all the way through the summer. These sessions are the perfect way to prepare and refresh for the next academic year and beyond. Book your place at courageousleadership.co.uk/events now. The first 50 leaders to sign up get an additional free mini coaching session with Diana herself. Don't miss this. Courageous Leadership Masterclasses at courageousleadership.co.uk/events.
Welcome back. We are talking compassionate teaching and fast running out of time. So I'm going to invite Steph live on radio now, so she can't deny it, to come back for part 2 later on, perhaps in the year. Is that a yes, Steph?
Absolutely.
Absolutely good. So I thought what would be a really good way to kind of finish the show up, to wrap up, is almost to kind of do a bit of a ramp into Tom's show in September. Where he is looking at compassionate leadership. So I wondered if we can kind of perhaps maybe get a little bit of a flavour of what you think it is to be a compassionate teacher as a leader, and you're head of department. So just wondering what sort of challenges that you faced in trying to drive improvement within your teams, and how you've overcome them or attempted to overcome them. And I'm just going to kind of pair that as well with another question from Tom in the text there. Says, as a leader, how do we create compassionate yet critically robust cultures? So to be able to answer both of those in 4 minutes, I think is impossible. But perhaps maybe you could just kind of, I guess, sing us out at the end of the show here with your kind of with a kind of a summary of your reflections on what it is to be a compassionate leader.
Oh, you're asking for a nutshell, Dorian. You know.
I am, aren't I?
Nutshell is very good.
We may be able to overrun slightly if you get carried away.
Okay, I think challenges I've had in the past has been kind of going all steam ahead with a great idea that I've worried and thought about myself, and then I've presented it and thought so long about it, and then I've been too scared to deal with the challenges or the questions, because I took them personally, because I was so invested in it. Any challenge or critique was like, I took it to be about me. And this is what I mean about like being compassionate and coming down to that level. It's looking at your own biases. And so now I'm very open with it. And I think, you know, with anything you're trying to implement, I always use the Nosta's 8-step model for managing complex change. And the key step for that is vision. And I think we've all been in situations where an idea gets presented, feedback's requested, and then seemingly ignored. And you just kind of think, well, what was the point in asking for my feedback on that, you know? So whenever I'm putting something in the beginning, I don't do too much on it, because I think, well, actually, there's no point, because this might not work out. My team might not want it. So I'll say, okay, like we reflected on a scheme of work we'd done, and we noticed that the kids in our assessments were they were lacking vocabulary to express themselves. So I played a video from Dorian Research School, one of their Twilight Insets about vocab. And I just showed it to staff and said, look, what do you think of this? We've identified vocab. What about these ideas, you know? And some staff were a bit like, oh, well, it's like teaching your grandmother a suck eggs a bit, isn't it? You know, we know all this and we do it. And I'm like, right, that's fine. What is it about it that's like that? What can we take for it, you know? And I was very, very clear. And it's this part of vulnerability and saying, okay, I'm not an expert in this, but we've identified it. I think it's important, but what do you think? I want critical feedback. I want your expertise. You know the school. You know these kids. You know what's been done before. You've been teaching longer than me. You have different experiences to me. I value your opinion. You know, tell me. And I'm like, okay, what are the problems that could happen? If we go with this idea, what's that going to look like? And, you know, staff then went away, and I think it's about time. So staff, you know, present something, maybe people are tired in that moment, give time to go away, to reflect, to think about it. And actually the staff member who'd originally said, oh, you know, it's all been done before, came back and said, actually, Steph, at the next meeting, I've got 3 games I'd like to do to show people how I teach vocab, which was really nice. And then we had another staff member who went away and did research on tier 2 words. And then we put a trial together for year 9 about how we introduce vocabulary, and then we explored, you know, a little bit on retrieval practice and the best ways to teach it. And then we critiqued it at the end and said, okay, this was a lot of effort to make these resources, to do it. It eats into the start of every lesson time. Is it worthwhile? Do we want to do this? You know, and
I like that, because you're building that sense of buy-in, aren't you? I think that's, as you noted at the beginning of this bit that you said, you know, it's not always easy to kind of get that whole group buy-in into these ideas, and breaking it down and giving people ownership for certain for certain parts is definitely a way to do that, for sure.
And I think the compassionate side of that, as I said, is removing your own bias and your own like ego from it. Oh, well, you don't like my idea, you know, now I feel like critiqued or silly that I didn't know this or something. And it's like, well, no, I don't have all the answers, you know.
And that can be so difficult to do sometimes as well, can't it?
It can. And that's about, you know, courage, and that's about vulnerability. And so I think it's just small things that help create and shift those team dynamics. I think.
Steph, I think that's absolutely wonderful. I think it's a really nice kind of poignant point to end the show on, and kind of almost give a lead into to Tom Rogers' show, but also hopefully a nice place for us to pick up when we have a part 2 over the next few weeks or so. So thank you so much for your time today. I know I hope you won't mind me saying that I know that you were quite nervous coming on a radio show, etc.
Absolutely,
you absolutely,
I'm okay with that. I'm very vulnerable.
Yeah.
Okay. I was really nervous.
You're so interesting, so engaging, so knowledgeable, and your experiences are just I definitely, every time I have a conversation with you, come away from it, it really does make me think and reflect about myself more from just having conversations with you. So I hope everybody listening, either right now live or on the downloads later, are able to kind of get anything from what we've just talked about. It is a huge issue. It's a huge kind of topic to definitely not be able to get covered in a whole hour. But I hope that you've gotten something from it. Do continue to discuss on Twitter, etc. And Steph and I will be back sometime in the future for part 2. Thank you very much, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.